Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Pyromancer here, and welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all having a wonderful day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. And today, we're going to be talking about the new World of Warcraft novel, Shadows Rising. Now, if you guys did not know, there is a new novel on the way. It's going to be releasing July 14th of this year, and it is written by Madeline Rowe. I believe that's how that's supposed to be pronounced. And this book is going to be what essentially bridges 8.3, as far as we're aware, 8.3 to the beginning, 9.0 of the Shadowlands. And this is basically supposed to provide some additional context to the actions of Sylvanas Windrunner. And as you guys may know, a lot of the context and thought process of Sylvanas' actions throughout the course of BFA are actually not very well highlighted, if at all, within the game. And you have to actually kind of delve into extrinsic sources of lore, multifaceted media, essentially, books and comics and things of that nature, in order to actually understand what Sylvanas is doing, or at least understand her thought process during these actions. And I'm going to read to you guys today the preview excerpt from the book itself. And this book is going to detail several things as far as the stance between the Alliance and Horde post Fourth War. It's going to talk about some of Sylvanas' actions after the defeat of N'Zoth, specifically in regards to what seems to be a potential assassination attempt on Queen Talanji, and BWONSAMDI, which is an interesting one. And we're going to talk about all of that. The excerpt isn't that long, so I'm going to read you guys the preview, which is available here on Amazon, where you can pre-order the book for $21.31 for the hardcover, which is not bad. Or you can get it on Kindle for $13.99. And then I'm going to use Blizzard Watch, the website, and I'll have a link to this down below, reading the actual preview excerpt from the book itself. And thank you to Blizzard Watch for consolidating that and providing that on their website. That's what we're going to use as our reference material today. So here on Amazon, I'm just going to read this really quick. It's rather short. The Horde is nothing! With those infamous words, Sylvanas Windrunner betrayed and abandoned the Horde she vowed to serve. The Dark Lady and her forces now work in the shadows as both the Horde and Alliance, including her own sister, Illyria, race to uncover her next move. Struggling to shoulder the crushing weight of leadership, King Anduin entrusted the Void Elf and High Exarch Turalyon to uncover Sylvanas' whereabouts. The Horde now stands at a crossroads. The various factions form a council, leaving the mantle of War Chief to rest. Thrall, Lor'themar Theron, Bane Bloodhoof, First Arcanist Thalyssra, and many other familiar faces rise to this new challenge. But the threats are numerous, and the distrust runs too deep. When the council is derailed by a failed assassination attempt on Talanji, the Zandalari Queen, and a key ally, Thrall and the rest of the Horde leaders are forced into action. They empower the young troll shaman Zakan, still grieving the loss of Varrock Sarfang, with a critical mission to aid Talanji and help uncover the rising threat against her. Meanwhile, Nathanos Blightcaller and Sira Moonwarden have been tasked by the Dark Lady with a terrifying gambit to kill the troll Loa of Death himself, BWONSAMDI. As Zakan and Talanji work to save BWONSAMDI, their journey will be a key turning point in bolstering the Horde against the coming darkness and finding themselves along the way. Failure to save their allies and the Trickster God will surely doom them. But through success, they may rediscover what makes the Horde strong. And that's a little synopsis of the plot of the book, to give you a base overview of what's going to be happening. Now, let's kind of just go over this really quick. The Horde is nothing, harkening back to Sylvanas' infamous words when she shouted this at the gates of Orgrimmar. I like how it's basically saying the Dark Lady and her forces now work in the shadows. Because back when Sylvanas was appointed to become the War Chief by Vol'jin, which we still don't fully understand the entire context of, he tells her, "You must step out of the shadows. You must be War Chief." Let's not forget that someone or something, or a couple someone or somethings, told Vol'jin to make her the War Chief. And there's actually a quest line which I'm going to speak quite a bit about later on in this video, which you can actually go through in the game still and see who could have been doing that. Now, Struggling to shoulder the crushing weight of leadership, King Anduin entrusts the Void Elf and High Exarch Turalyon to uncover Sylvanas' whereabouts. So King Anduin is once again, understandably so, I mean, he's very young, relying upon his advisors and most trusted lieutenants to carry out very important tasks. The crushing weight of leadership is very interesting, because there's been some quite clear parallels between Anduin and Arthas, and I would hope that this crushing weight of leadership does not inevitably lead to the downfall of King Anduin Wrynn, because I actually quite like Anduin as a character. And of course, you see the Void Elf and Turalyon, Illyria and Turalyon, Void and Light, essentially teaming up to try to find this lady who is basically serving the will of death. I think that's fairly ironic and convenient, considering I've said that the Void and Light in the grand context of the universe are essentially going to achieve the same goal regardless of which one of them wins the Great War, and that death is the only way to stop them. But I digress. Let's move on. The Horde is now at a crossroads. So they've essentially discontinued the idea of a war chief, and now they have a council. And there's a distrust among this council. As it says here, distrust runs too deep. So someone tries to assassinate Talanji, and after the preview, I'm going to tell you who I think it was. The Zandalari Queen and a key ally. Now, Thrall is coming back into the fold here. Now, I don't know how much of a fan I am of this. I think a lot of it comes from the fandom surrounding Zappy Boy, a.k.a. Zakan. They empower Zakan, who is still grieving for Saurfang. Understandably, they grew quite close over the course of Battle for Azeroth, to aid Talanji and help uncover the rising threat against her. Let's not forget the name of the book, Shadows Rising. So, the threat against Talanji that's rising may very well be the Shadows, which Sylvanas serves or is working with. You're kind of already seeing who I think is probably trying to assassinate Talanji. Meanwhile, Nathanos Blightcaller and Sira Moonwarden have been tasked by Sylvanas to kill the Troll Loa of Death himself, BWONSAMDI. Now, why would they want to do that? Well, as I'm going to show you a little bit later, throughout the course of the quest lines with Vol'jin, during which you actually confront three characters, Ayer, Bolvar Fordragon, the Lich King himself, and BWONSAMDI, BWONSAMDI makes it quite clear that he is not a fan of Sylvanas, and she be tipping the scales too far. And BWONSAMDI is not a big fan of that. Now, I'm going to elaborate more upon why Sylvanas would choose to have BWONSAMDI executed rather than the Lich King or Ayer herself. I think there's a couple very clear things, like Ayer probably being too powerful, and the fact that Sylvanas no longer has that soul cage to try to bind Ayer as she attempted before. Her actually just dicking on the Lich King and fucking his helmet up. Not really a need for her to have him assassinated, because she can just deal with him herself. But to send people after BWONSAMDI is an interesting one. Moving on, as Zakan and Talanji work to save BWONSAMDI, the coming darkness and finding themselves along the way, etc., fail to save their allies, and the trickster god, I like how they describe BWONSAMDI there, will surely doom them. Failure to save them. But through success, they may rediscover what makes the Horde strong. And that last little line is an interesting one. Because if you remember back to the opening cutscene of Battle for Azeroth, Sylvanas says, "Ours is a cycle of hatred, alliances forged and broken. We have paid the price for sharing this world,
and we have forgotten what makes us strong."
And though there are many interpretations to what she's talking about, it is most likely war that she is referring to. But through success, they may rediscover what makes the Horde strong. So let's read the preview here on blizzardwatch.com. So we've actually already just read this first part, so we don't need to read that. If you don't want to know any more than the back-to-book basics, go away from the video, as Blizzard Watch is telling you right now. If you don't want spoilers, you should probably not continue this video. But here we go. Zakan had not avoided the unforgiving boot of war by staying still. No. He learned to make himself useful, to stay useful, and to know when that usefulness had come to its end. Had he not been stationed at Varrock Saurfang's side on the battlements of Lordaeron by twiddling his thumbs or taking a nap? And so, he did not stand still while his commander fell into a quiet, intense exchange with the Earthen Ring Shaman. Zakan casually fell into step behind the tall and well-armed leader of the Darkspear Trolls, Rokan. using his shadow as a concealment of sorts, ignoring the screams and cheers of the crowd as the assembled council members and their assorted bodyguards, advisors, and hangers-on retreated to the tempting shade of the feast tents. Zakan wasn't foolish enough to think those celebratory cheers were for him. No. He was in a shadow and was a shadow. First his father's, then Saurfang's, and now Thrall's. And as a shadow, he crept along, looking for something interesting enough to occupy his time. "Keep your hands busy and your mind sharp," his father Hekazia told him when Zakan was still knee-high to a raptor, "and you will never want for work nor amusement." Work and amusement would have to go hand in hand that day. A drum circle with a trio of wild dancers had been set up outside the tents to welcome the esteemed guests. He watched the goblin, Gazlo, sidle up toward the drums, doing a silly two-step and making the dancers laugh. The music, the steady, infectious rhythm of it gradually spread to the others approaching the tent, tense shoulders moving to the beat, narrowed eyes widening with appreciation at the talented, and scantily dressed, dancers. Only Talanji and her Zandalari contingent stood apart. The detached detachment. He wasn't exactly surprised. While the Horde Council had welcomed her and her folk warmly, her response so far had been nothing but chilly. Zakan had kept a close eye on her, intrigued and, admittedly, a little besotted with the beautiful queen. She had the most delicate tusks and arresting blue eyes. She also, quite clearly, had a temper. Talanji paced back and forth on the far southern end of the feast tables, a turquoise-skinned, yellow-haired young troll girl fanning the queen with a massive palm frond. Annoyed with the little puffs of wind, Talanji batted at the girl, shooing her away. Zakan frowned. Had there not been more bodyguards with Talanji when they arrived? Or had one of her handmaidens gone missing? Orgrimmar was not the most confusing city to navigate in the world, but perhaps one of the Zandalari had gotten lost on their way to the meeting that afternoon. Maybe, he thought. Maybe. He sidled closer, sensing an opportunity. The Horde needed every advantage it could get, and that meant securing Talanji's faith anew. Their grieving ally did not seem keen on joining them in war or peace, or willing to provide troops, or ready to embrace the council. No, she didn't seem very impressed at all. "Might I be of service, your majesty?" Zakan gave a low bow and brought out his most dazzling smile. The girl fanning the queen made a tiny sound of alarm. The queen herself stared at him, through him, then rolled her eyes. "And how could you possibly be of service?" Her keen eyes no doubt took in his humble garments and dirt under his fingernails. Meanwhile, she and her servants glittered like firebugs at dusk. "Your entourage be looking a little light. If you need an errand run or a fresh cup of wine," Talanji tilted her head to the side, her earrings jangling softly as she interrupted him. "You are spying on me now?" Not the response he was hoping for. Zakan backed away, already bracing for the lecture Thrall would give him for bothering the queen. He threw up his arms as if in surrender, a cold shiver overcoming him, like someone had traced the tip of a knife down his spine. And then he fell backward, steady 1 minute and flailing the next, his elbow smashing into something hard and then wet. A goblet. Talanji's missing servant had returned and Zakan had crashed right into him. The cup clattered to the ground, splashing wine all over Zakan's feet and the hem of Talanji's gown. "Mind yourself!" the servant carrying the tray and goblet shouted, scrambling to scoop up the fallen goblet. He was older than Talanji, the servant, with scars crisscrossing his nose and a visible sheen of sweat over his brow. "Clumsy oaf! That was the queen's wine!" "Just a mistake," Talanji said, calmly lifting her skirt to inspect the damage. "He meant no harm." But Zakan stopped listening to the queen, staring at the stain on the fine white silk of her dress. First Arcanist Thalysra's silken voice was suddenly in his head. "I cannot wait for you to sample our Arkfruit Sangri, Lorthamar. We have generously arranged enough for all of Orgrimmar to enjoy." The ugly splotch on the queen's hem was purplish blue and turning black. What's more, the puddle left behind on the dirt smelled distinctly of death. "Another cup for you, Majesty. I will return," the servant was saying, bowing to Talanji as he shuffled away. "No." Zakan knelt and swept his fingers through the spill on the ground, then sniffed. Whatever it wasn't wine. An herbal tea, maybe, or something worse. What you be serving her? Wine, the servant stammered, but the sweat on the troll's brow poured heavy down his temples. Just wine. Standing, Zakan had just enough time to wedge himself between Talanji and the scarred servant, who yanked a dagger from under his tunic and lunged toward the queen. The commotion had aroused the interest of the entire council, and now Zakan felt the feasting tents explode into chaos around him. The drums went abruptly silent, followed by hushed whispers from the crowd outside. Back! Zakan thundered at Talanji. Behind me! A throwing axe flew straight over Zakan's shoulder, close enough to give him a haircut. He shrugged it off, hurling a fork of lightning right after the axe. The bolt slammed into the servant and into a tent pole before he slumped to the ground. The throwing axe buried in the ground beside him, a narrow miss. Thrall's heavy tread came next, and then his intimidating shadow as he raced by them and toward the assassin. That explained the axe. Hold him! Someone was shouting, and protect the queen! Zakan shook the cotton out of his ears and stumbled after Thrall, who reached the assailant a moment too late. The dagger was still in the troll's hand and swiftly put to use, jammed into his own stomach and yanked upward. Speak! Thrall had the troll by his neck, but the dagger had done its gruesome work. Who sent you? Who sent you? The old scarred troll had just enough left in him to whisper a final threat. Then his head went loose on his neck, a trickle of blood seeping from between his withered lips. She will know our bite. No sooner had the troll spoken his last than Talanji was upon them, pushing Thrall and Zakan aside and kneeling in the blood-soaked earth beside the assassin. He is Zandalari, one of my own. But how? All of your people must be held and questioned, Thrall replied sternly. There is never just one assassin. Question your own people, Talanji fumed, leaping to her feet, her hands and gown covered in blood, covered in poison. We will return home before more blood can be spilled. Thrall sighed and shifted, standing in her way. I assure you. You can assure me nothing. Not sheep's, not soldiers, not my own personal safety. She straightened her head, and at her height, she could easily look Thrall in the eye. Zakan cowered, a different kind of energy crackling around them. You do not need me here. Zandala will always need me. So that is where I will be. All eyes followed the Zandalari queen as she gathered her small entourage and marched out of the tents, head held high and proud. All eyes, Zakan noted, except for those belonging to Thrall. It had all happened in the space of a blink, the assassin, the lightning, the queen's outrage. He couldn't help but fixate on the moment when his arms knocked the cup out of the assassin's hand. He felt certain his feet had been firmly planted on the ground, that something or someone had shoved him back into the Zandalari. The council members came one by one, drawn by the commotion, Darkspear chieftain Rokan appearing at his side, only then sheathing his daggers. Smirking, the taller troll clapped Zakan on the back, and Zakan was just dizzy enough from the chaos to sway a little from the force of it. You did good, boy. Those be the reflexes of Sindal. But I didn't do it. The lightning he could take credit for, but the cup? The cup. He frowned, gazing around at the faces of relieved council members. Only Thrall shared his concern, visible at the back of the crowd, his brow furrowed, his eyes dark and distant. Now all the mightiest the Horde had to offer gathered around him, echoing Rakan's sentiments. Already he heard someone say the word hero, and Zakan shook his head. No. He wasn't a hero at all. Just a boy from the jungles, from a village that would fit inside the gates of Orgrimmar 100 times over. He only wanted to make himself useful, not win some kind of accolade. Zakan found Thrall's face among the throng again, but his expression went unchanged. The single black smudge in the sky on a cloudless day, the distant warning presaging rain. Only a few would notice it, only a few would take heed. But when the great leader worried, the wise warrior beneath him worried too. The Darkspear chieftain placed a hand on his shoulder, but Zakan didn't smile. He trembled instead. What an awesome little excerpt. I love that. That was great. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my narration of that. So, here's what I think happened. I think it's possible that considering that BWONSAMDI has himself bound to the bloodline of King Rastakhan, which I think was a very particular and very calculated move by BWONSAMDI. BWONSAMDI himself might actually have to have some type of bloodline link to a ruler in order to stay relevant within the Zandalari or within the Troll Society, or maybe to even stay empowered at all. I think that was very intentional. Someone tried to kill Talanji. I would be willing to bet that it was probably Sylvanas Windrunner. She probably had tasked someone to do that. That's my first bet. Again, Sylvanas Windrunner doesn't like BWONSAMDI, and BWONSAMDI does not like Sylvanas Windrunner. This has become rather evident. When it comes to saving Talanji from assassination, Zakan is pointing out that he is pretty sure that something happened to him that would cause him to stumble backward into the servant carrying the poisoned wine. I would be willing to bet that that was BWONSAMDI. I mean, if BWONSAMDI has a link to Talanji and there's a specific reason for which he has accomplished this, it would make sense to me that BWONSAMDI is in some capacity trying to protect her. And considering that BWONSAMDI can kind of sit in the shadow plane just outside of our perception in reality, it would not surprise me in any capacity if the one who actually pushed Zakan into the servant was in fact BWONSAMDI. Now, as far as the rest of this goes, Talanji leaving head held high and proud is so typical of a Zandalari. They are a proud people who are not so quick to admit that they need help, which is actually something that is referenced to as far back as Mists of Pandaria, from Emperor Xiaohao, who says that things are going to get worse before they get better, and that old allies will come to bolster one another, and proud people will admit they need help. And I loosely paraphrased there. I do think that he was kind of prophesizing or foreshadowing something that was to come. Regardless of that, Talanji seems rather detached from the Horde. She doesn't have very much confidence in their ability to benefit her, to do anything for the Zandalari people, because they couldn't keep her own father safe. But what I think a partial truth of it is that I think part of that is BWONSAMDI's fault. I think BWONSAMDI probably could have done a better job to protect King Rastakhan. But King Rastakhan got exactly what he kind of asked for, and so did BWONSAMDI. BWONSAMDI made the very distinct deal with Rastakhan for the link to the bloodline, because BWONSAMDI, quite frankly, probably had planned for Rastakhan to die, which ultimately did not work very well in the Horde's favor. Ironically, the journey to Zandalar and the freeing of Talanji and Zul from the stockade was orchestrated directly from Sylvanas and in line with Zul's prophecies. But it's interesting that it hasn't played out how one would perceive Sylvanas would want it to. Now, why would Sylvanas want to kill BWONSAMDI? As we know, is quite a prevalent thing in this book. Well, let's talk about Vol'jin's resurrection. Because after Vol'jin is resurrected, he tells you his mind be hazy. He can't really see to the shadows which had been influencing him. Death be dark, man. So Vol'jin asks your help. He goes, basically, we got to find out what the fuck happened to me. And so you go and visit BWONSAMDI, and you go and visit Ayer, and you go and visit the Lich King. And it's three very different interactions which happen during this quest line. And we will start with BWONSAMDI.
You come back. Did you find the spirit of Vol'jin? Or you're here to make a deal?
Loa of Death, your servant Vol'jin has called to you, yet you have turned a deaf ear to his pleas.
What? You be mistaken, Talanji.
Speak plainly. Was it you who urged Vol'jin to name Sylvanas war chief?
Mind your tone. bull man, or you'll be talking with your father soon enough. Sure, why would me want the Banshee Queen in charge? No. Sure, I'm an alpha warrior, dead, but that's Sylvanas. She be tipping the scales too far. Balance be important. Besides, that one got a nasty habit of keeping what she kills. No, your war chief be no friend to old BWONSAMDI. Your words are trouble we do. Step forward, speaker of the horde. Maybe there be a way to find the answers you seek.
So basically he says, go and talk to Ayer, and go and talk to the Lich King. So here we go and we visit Ayer.
Minions of the Banshee Queen, leave this place or die. Hold. You dare bring a priestess of BWONSAMDI into my halls?
Ayer, speak with me if the others not be to your liking.
Very well. You and your champion may approach, but know that deception will be met with destruction.
Queen of the Valkyrie, my spirit was sent to the other side, then returned. Was this your doing?
Shadow Hunter, you are no longer a mere spirit. What you have become is something beyond my power to forge.
Who be having such power? Could it be the same one who bid me to name Sylvanas war chief?
You have been touched by the hand of valor. Such a noble force does not scheme for mortal thrones.
So, whoever whispered to me is not the same as who sent me back.
You have been granted all the knowledge I am willing to share. Leave now, and never return.
And then we have the Lich King. And after I finish this one, we're going to talk about all of them.
Lich King, the voice I heard as I be dying, telling me to name Sylvanas war chief. Was it yours?
The Banshee Queen's schemes threatened the balance. I had no hand in them.
And me spirit being trapped in this world. Is that your doing?
Vol'jin, your soul has walked on the other side and returned. You have been altered more than you know. You are neither undead nor damned. You do not belong here. Leave this place at once. Leave now or stay forever. The choice is yours.
Now, I found this pretty interesting because you have three very different interactions that happen here. First off, you go to BWONSAMDI and you say, look, did you have anything to do with this? And BWONSAMDI basically says, no, I don't like Sylvanas. We're not friends. I'm no friend of her. Absolutely not. She's tipping the scales, and balance is very important. She'd be tipping the scales too far. But BWONSAMDI is not aggressive, nor is BWONSAMDI threatening. He makes no show of force, and he's not outraged that you're even there. The only thing about the BWONSAMDI interaction that I find rather interesting is that we know that BWONSAMDI is vying for souls, because G'huun was a very huge detriment to his intake of souls of the Zandalari. And that behind his giant temple in Nazmir, he has this giant blood moon thing. I don't even know what it is, but which could be comprised entirely of anima power, because it matches some of the anima stuff we've seen from the Shadowlands preview. It could be souls. I don't know what BWONSAMDI does with his souls. I have no idea. But BWONSAMDI's not very helpful, frankly, in the whole situation. And the other thing that I found interesting is Bane gets a little temperamental after you essentially, Talanji asks, she says basically, your servant Vol'jin has been calling out to you, and you have not answered him. And BWONSAMDI goes, what? No, 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 no. You be mistaken, Talanji. And you can take that a couple different ways. How I took that was maybe what BWONSAMDI is suggesting is that Vol'jin is not his servant. That Vol'jin has no binding to BWONSAMDI at this point. And that she's mistaken, and that, no, he's not my servant, he's not reaching out to me. But Bane interrupts and says, speak plainly. He gets rather impatient. I found that to be very interesting, because BWONSAMDI doesn't really elaborate on it anymore after that point. We go to Aiur, and Aiur basically identifies that we're minions of the Banshee Queen, apparently. But upon approaching after killing several of her Valkyr, she is more outraged that we would bring a priestess of BWONSAMDI into our temple. She's not upset at Vol'jin at all, and she's more upset that there is a priestess of BWONSAMDI there. Now again, these are deities of death and an afterlife in a sense, and so she could be rather upset at the presence of another death god or death-aligned beings, priest there. I just found that really interesting. She's rather outraged at that. Makes me think that Aiur is not a very big fan of BWONSAMDI. But Aiur basically lets some information through. We get the revelation that it's a multi-party thing that has occurred here with Vol'jin. That there was one who whispered to him, and there was one who sent him back. And given that the Valkyr and Sylvanas were present at the Broken Shore during the time where Vol'jin was struck down, and then taken to the War Chief's throne room in Orgrimmar, it could have something to do with that. But Aiur also is thrown out there that he has been touched by the hand of valor, and he has become something beyond her power to forge. But Aiur knows, in a sense at least, this is divulging the fact that she's aware something has happened to him that she's not willing to tell us. This is all the information I'm willing to share. Now leave. But she's not aggressive, and she's not making a threat. She's basically like, this is all I'm willing to tell you. Now get the fuck out of my sight. So it's a little bit different than BWONSAMDI. Then we go to the Lich King. And the Lich King is completely different. One, he just flat out says, I had nothing to do with what the Banshee Queen is doing. She threatens the balance. So whatever this balance is that they're referring to, presumably the balance between life and death, BWONSAMDI is very aware of, and the Lich King is very aware of as well. But both of them are against the threatening of said balance. But then Vol'jin says, was it you who keeps my soul tethered to this plane? And the Lich King doesn't deny it. The Lich King actually doesn't even answer that question. Instead, Bolvar basically says, you've walked on the other side, and your soul has been altered in a greater way than you even know. Which implies that the Lich King knows what the fuck happened to Vol'jin, does it not? Bolvar knew. He just didn't want to say anything, and he outright does not deny that he took part in what happened to Vol'jin. You're gonna love this shit. Check this out. During the questline where you're going around to the different areas that kind of led to the events of Vol'jin dying, there's actually a part where, there's several parts actually throughout the questline, where you arrive at certain areas and you can actually see these like flaming eyes briefly kind of floating there in the air. For instance, here on the Broken Shore is an example of that. You have these glowing orange kind of flaming eyes looking at you. This happens not only here, but it happens in the throne room in Orgrimmar as well. Now, if I had to just throw a name out there of whose eyes these would be, I would probably say Bolvar Fourdragons, considering he has flaming glowing eyes that kind of trail off like that, which we've seen multiple times. I think Bolvar definitely had something to do with whatever happened to Vol'jin. And given the fact that the Valkyr have kind of this inherent relationship with the Lich King, the fact that Aiur and the fact that the Lich King both know that he's been altered in some interesting way beyond what Aiur is capable of, and something that they're all seemingly at least a little bit aware of, it kind of leads me to believe that maybe both Aiur and maybe the Lich King had something to do with what actually happened to Vol'jin. Regardless of whether or not it was beyond Aiur's power to forge, she is definitely directly as queen of them tied to the Valkyr. and the Valkyr being, kind of minions, if that's the way you want to look at it, of Sylvanas. So Sylvanas wanting to kill BWONSAMDI, who is relatively unhelpful in this entire situation, but is in direct opposition to the Lich King and direct opposition to Ayer, that's not surprising that she'd want that to happen. It seems to me rather evident that Sylvanas is, as she stands now, probably not powerful enough to, well, she could be at this point, to basically directly bind Ayer, because she tried to use the soul cage, which she had obtained from Helya in order to do so. She probably can't do that now, nor can she likely send anyone to assassinate Ayer. Ayer seems well beyond that scope of power. She can definitely handle the Lich King by her own. She does it herself. We see it in the cinematic. She doesn't need to send anyone to assassinate him. But to keep herself detached, it's possible that she sends someone. It's not possible. We know that she's going to send Nathanos and Sira Moonwarden to kill BWONSAMDI. And considering that there's an assassination attempt upon Talanji who is bound to BWONSAMDI, it would not surprise me if those who were behind the assassination attempt of Talanji was actually also Sylvanas Windrunner. That wouldn't surprise me at all. So this is quite interesting because it begs the question, like, what kind of game is Sylvanas playing here in regards to actions of the Lich King or Ayer, and how is killing BWONSAMDI going to help her? Perhaps she can take all of the souls which BWONSAMDI has presumably shepherded into the Shadowlands, or at least coagulated into one massive source of power, and use that to her advantage. Or perhaps take that source of power and feed that to someone like the Jailer, if she is in fact in league with the Jailer, as we're led to believe. This definitely opens up some discussion. And I definitely don't think that the Lich King's hands were clean in this. I don't know how Sylvanas came to understand that there was some kind of link between the Lich King's helmet and the Shadowlands, or perhaps it was just full of so much soul power that she was understanding that ripping it apart would basically shatter open this window and this veil. But I like this little preview. I think it provides some interesting context to the upcoming events. And I think that there's obviously much more to be discovered. And as you guys know, I will purchase the book. I will pre-order it. And I will give a summary of the book in a video, as I did with Before the Storm. And I'm sure that it will be a great read. And I'm excited to share that with you guys. So that's kind of my analysis and thoughts in this situation. I think that there's more that I want to elaborate on in a different video. We'll save that. But yeah, I think that this is quite interesting. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Leave a comment down there and a like on this video to help me beat the shit out of the YouTube algorithm. And also, just to let me know you enjoy the content. It's the best way to support me here on YouTube is to just drop a like on the video. If you guys enjoyed this video and would like more stuff like this in the future, just something to listen to while you play WoW or do other things in the background, please hit the subscribe button. 60% of the people who view my videos aren't subscribed, and subscribing is free. It's easy. And it's so close to the 100,000 subscriber goal that I set for myself 6 years ago. We are 20K away, and I'd much appreciate all of you guys contributing to that goal. Even if you never watch one of my videos again, throw a subscription on there and help me get there. I appreciate you guys very much. The only other thing is I stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Pyromancer. I have a Twitter, twitter.com/PyromancerSarg. And of course, I have a Patreon, which you can find a link to down in the description below. All my links are in the description down below, as well as the Amazon link for the book, where you can pre-order it, and the Blizzard Watch page. So with that being said, you guys, I appreciate you very much. Thank you so much for watching this video. Stay awesome. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace.